evening, everybody. My name is Anne-Hélène Illich. I'm co-heading Private Wealth in Paris, and I look after French entrepreneurs. It's my pleasure today to welcome Governor Noyer. Governor Noyer, you are one of Europe's most distinguished figures in economic policymaking. You have served in some of the most influential positions in both France and Europe, including as head of the French Treasury, chief of staff of the finance minister, vice president of the European Central Bank, and governor of Banque de France. Since stepping down as governor in 2015, you were appointed by Finance Minister Le Maire to lead the work to strengthen Paris' attractiveness as a financial center and were pivotal in establishing the foundation for many global firms, including my own, Goldman Sachs, to expand their footprint post-Brexit. I've got to thank you. It's thanks to you I'm back to Paris with my kids and I can raise them with proper food. You've been more recently turned your attention and expertise to supporting the renewed momentum to integrate Europe's capital markets to create a true saving and investment union. You released a highly influential report in April this year calling for an array of reform, such as establishing a pan-European saving products, reviving Europe's securitization market, and moving towards a more integrated model for market supervision. Governor Noyer, I can't think of anyone better positioned to have this conversation of the opportunity and challenges ahead for French and European businesses looking to grow and scale. Thank you very much for being here today. So if I may ask you to start, according to EY's attractiveness survey, France has been the most attractive country in Europe for investment in the past 5 years. You've really been at the heart of positioning Paris as a leading financial center. What policies is the new government putting in place to defend this position? And how are you looking to facilitate investment specifically in new technologies?
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. Great honor. Thank you, Anne-Hélène. Well, moving to your question now, I would say, in a way, it all started with the Brexit, when we were in Paris probably identifying more acutely and a bit earlier than many others that this would have immense consequences, because I thought that the UK could not be a rules taker, would probably decide to leave the single market, and since the essence of the single market is to be with the same rules, one market, but one set of rules and one set of one regulatory framework, then there would be unnecessarily relocations. And then we thought we have a specific asset in Paris, which is the pool of talents, especially for market activities, and it all started like that. But this was, of course, could only happen if there was, if the appropriate reforms were put in place, because at the time we were considered, and probably rightly so, as being too bureaucratic, with a too rigid labor market, especially in the financial sector. Not only there, but also there. It was key for the financial sector to be more flexible. And the tax system was seen as too adverse to business and changing all the time. And fortunately, the reforms which were put in place 8 years ago, 8 years ago now, responded to all those needs. So we changed completely, we overhauled completely the tax system, both for corporates and for individuals. For corporates, there was a decision in principle to lower the corporate tax rate from 33 to 25, which is more or less the average in Europe. And it was done in several steps, but the marching plan was followed. And eventually we cut also production taxes. We introduced a permanent reduction on the levies on the cost of labor. So that really the whole picture changed. For individuals, there was the introduction of a flat tax. There was the deletion of the wealth tax and several improvements. For individuals relocating to France, we had already a very good system inspired by the non-dom system in the UK, which now is maybe at stake a little bit, we don't know. But we created the so-called impatriate regime, and that was improved several times. By the way, it's amazing to see that it was created under President Sarkozy. It was somewhat improved under President Hollande, and again improved and extended to 8 years under President Macron. So it's really, it gives the sense that we understand the need for attractiveness in Paris. So all that, plus the permanent assets we have, I mentioned already the pool of talents. The pool of talents is both the fact that we have people coming out from universities, business schools, and engineering schools who like to work and are able to work in the most technical and difficult issues in the financial sector. But we also have, of course, the attractiveness of the city. We have the fact that it's geographically extremely well placed. It's the first hub for airlines. Is also an excellent location for moving by train, especially to London. So all these all together, and we improve the schooling system, especially for people whose familial tradition is not to be educated in French. So international schools, that sort of thing. So all that together created a sort of ecosystem which favored the development, and it worked extremely well. That's true.
Yeah, I can tell you my kids are very happy to be in France compared to the UK. Here with my colleague of private wealth, I can see some of you in the room, we're seeing more and more ultra net worth individuals coming back from the UK or the US to get closer to their roots and culture and to celebrate French culture. There is a new government. What do you think they're going to do to increase the ease of relocating and repatriating wealth into France?
Well, it's a bit early to know exactly what will be the major topics taken, but I would say first, keeping what worked well is an extremely important thing, and in particular the impatriate regime, which has worked very well and provides a tax environment for people relocating with, of course, always specific costs when you really relocate is an important asset to preserve, and that's the objective of the government today. Second, I would say the environment for families is certainly very important, and the direction taken on developing international schools, creating new ones, facilitating the education in different languages, especially in English, not always only in English. We created very recently a European school where you can have also the education in various languages, not only English, but German, Italian, and others. That's quite an important feature, and of course, I mean the attractiveness of the city. It's not only that it's nice to be in Paris, nice to have dinner in Paris, it's nice to spend a weekend in Paris, but it's more than that. For instance, if you come to Paris because you want to invest there, to manage your investments there, or you want to work with a firm that is developing its presence in Paris. You eventually have a spouse or partner who might be working not in finance, but in a different area. Paris is one of the few cities where you find all kinds of activities. So, of course, you find that in London, you find that in New York, but if your spouse or partner is working in the insurance industry and industrial businesses, almost all kind of businesses in the cultural area or whatever, the opportunity exists in Paris. And more you can do that without, even if you're not completely fluent in French or not fluent in French at the beginning. So I think it's really part of what can be appreciated or can convince you, well, to relocate where your roots are, where your culture, the heart of your culture is, and without sacrificing too many things in your family or environment, or even improving things sometimes.
Thank you very much. Now to move to another subject, there's a lot of discussion in Europe right now about meeting the investment demands of the green and digital transition. And you came out earlier this year with a hugely influential report on the role of capital markets and private finance in that effort. Can you speak a little bit about your key recommendation and findings?
Yes, sure, with pleasure. If you have eventually read or given a short look at many studies made by the European Commission or what has been written in the reports from Mario Draghi or Enrico Letta and others, we all come to more or less the same kind of numbers for the green and digital transition. We will need more, between 700 billion, 800 billion a year. Plus, we need a bit more investments to enhance the growth potential, which is too low in Europe. So it's somewhere between 700 billion a year and 1,000 billion a year, 1 trillion a year, additional investment that you will need. The money is there, by the way, because we have 13% average saving ratio in Europe. There's 15 trillion euros of household saving, which are ready to be, which are invested very often. At least 40 to 50% is invested in liquid assets, deposits, very short-term, guaranteed schemes, etc., with a very poor return. So the money is there, could be invested. We lack the instruments, we lack the culture, probably too much. And so the idea was very simple. Let's find a few instruments or ideas which can really make the difference in terms of capacity of investing. And the two major examples we found was one, we need to convince the Europeans and offer them products in all countries which can be more invested into equity, into long-term securities, into long-term investment, can be private capital also. Whether this is done through pension funds or personal pension schemes or personal investment schemes, as some exist in France already, but we should develop that and convince the savers that there is a lot of return they are missing today and they could get. And that's, of course, extremely important when you look at the retirement age or look into the future or the needs that will come when you have children at university or whatever. You will need more money and you need to save for that, but the highest the return is, the best, of course, it is for you. So that's an area that we've started to, that we propose, we started to discuss with the different ministries of finance and different governments, And there's a lot of political interest for that. How we will be able to transform that remains to be seen, but I see the momentum growing. As another idea we had was about market instruments to give room to especially finance the transition, the green and digital transition. As I told the 28 finance ministers when they invited me, those are 700 billion or 800 billion you will need a year. That will not come from public budgets. You have no more money. Everybody knows. So it will be maybe incremental, but very, very small. It will not come mostly from banks' balance sheet unless you find ways to make room in banks' balance sheet, because with the rules of Basel III, there is not many possibilities to increase the traditional lending. So you need to rely on capital markets. And one of the striking things in Europe, is that we have a very underdeveloped securitization market. By the way, it was much bigger at the time of the great financial crisis. Just before the great financial crisis, we had a market of 400 billion a year. Today is 150 billion. If it was equivalent to the size of the average size of the securitization market in the US and Canada, in Australia, in Japan, so it would be probably 1,000 billion or 800 billion a year. It was, if it was equivalent in real terms to what we had at the time, it would be 500 billion. In any case, there are several hundred billions a year simply to catch up with with what would have normally be the development in Europe. And if we were, in addition to that, creating a market with a European agency like you have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac in the US, or like what Canada, Japan, and Australia have created, probably we'll be able to build in a few years an additional 1,500 billion, 1.5 trillion of agencies in Europe. So all in all, you see that this is significant vis-à-vis the needs. It's easy to do normally because it's not only in the US, it's several industrial countries have been able to develop that. We know how to do it. What is blocking is first we need to create an agency, which is a political will. And second, we need to unblock the excessive regulations that we put in place at the time of the great financial crisis for banks and insurance companies. We did that in a hurry, but other countries did that. It was not done in the US, but where the problem came from. But it was done in Canada, in Japan, etc. But what they have done is once they made the reform to make the securitization market sure and on safe grounds, they relieved the excess regulation. And we've not done that in Europe. So the answer is very simple. We know exactly what to do. There also is just a question of political will. So that's basically some of the proposals, or the major proposals we made. And hopefully we'll be able to mobilize hundreds of billions a year to finance this transition.
Thank you very much. Maybe one final but very important question. We do look after entrepreneurs that are French entrepreneurs and going to the US. Often they're looking for either public listing or private funding. What are the national initiative or the European initiative to make sure that we address the key challenges and opportunities about having a European-based listed company or capital raised in Europe?
Well, there are different initiatives of different size. Very recently, we enforced a new legislation to facilitate IPOs or re-emission of capital on the market on the listed market for small companies. Private equity is developing very quickly. We have relatively strong actors in France. They are not of the size of the big American ones, but they are very significant and certainly unique in a way in Europe. And we are counting on all those initiatives to create that. What we've tried to do, which is probably the most striking or significant in Europe, is try to develop the tech ecosystem. It's a number of things. There are initiatives to take together the founders of new tech companies to exchange experiences, find ways to develop more rapidly. On the funding side, there's been an initiative taken several years ago, which was called the TIBI initiative, from the name of the person who created that, launched the idea. And it's, in a way, it's a scheme where institutional investors pull together money to finance tech companies in secondary stage. It was launched, I think, in about 10 years ago, and then a second step has been created with also taking into account the first stage of tech companies developing. It works extremely well. And the first TB initiative, I think, mobilized 6 to 7 billion euros. The new one is targeting to mobilize 10. It's all reinforced by the BPI, the public bank that is devoted to facilitate the funding of these fast-growing activities. It's apparently working rather well in domains like AI, where I think we have taken a certain lead in Europe to develop that. So all that is, I mean, creating a momentum, and I see the new government extremely interested in keeping the momentum and developing that. So that's one of the promising things. There will be others, and there are others, but good example of what we can do and continue to do, or even accelerate in the next few years to once again give the reputation of France and Paris as the place to be if you want to develop things very innovative and good promise for the future in Europe.
Thank you very much, Governor.
Thanks very much for your invitation.